What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video we're going to continue with our AdMob integration, and if you haven't seen the last video, this video does pick up where that one left off, so some things that are covered there will be useful here. This video we're going to be focusing specifically on interstitial ads. You can see we have our banner ads here, and we are logged into the same account on iOS and Android. So let me just quickly show you what that's going to look like on both. If we could do both at the same time. If we create a new trip, this one can be in, let's see what comes up, Ashburn, Virginia. This one we'll put another Tennessee and just hit continue. And this one will be 1, 2, 3, continue. And then if you hit, again, this is just the interstitial ad we're going to have pop up at the end of adding a new trip. So first on our iOS, if we click any button here, you'll see our interstitial ad comes up. Over here, same thing, click any button and our interstitial ad pops up. You'll see we're using our test ads, which I'm going to go over as well. But yes, then our interstitial ad you can X out of and you go back to the home page just as you would if the interstitial ad was not there. So let's get started. All right, so right before we begin, there were a lot of issues in the comments in the last video about AdMob that people were having where their ads were not displaying. Now, one problem that could be happening here is just that your ads on your AdMob account are not being displayed, but if you use the test ads, then you should, or you may start seeing ads. And this is because Google isn't always going to serve an ad, even if you have your your location ready for them to serve an ad there. They might not have an ad available at that time, or they just might not have one that they're going to serve on your account. So anyway, I'm going to first show you how to use these test keys. These are actually my live keys, so you wouldn't want to use these either, as you won't get the credit for that ad. But anyway, for the sake of this, let's get these test ads in. The quickest way here is to just comment out what we're returning here and then return the actual test values. You can find the test values here on the AdMob test site, so you can see the banner ad here. This is the iOS version, so just use that instead for iOS. And the Android version is similar, which will look like this. So now if you run your app, you'll see you're actually just getting a test ad here, and it'll always say nice job, and these will always be loaded regardless of your account status or any of that. So definitely switch over to these. Another thing, if you do continue using your production IDs, it might block your account, or there might be, I don't know, I've never had this happen, but potentially it could block your account with Google AdMobs because they'll think you're trying to basically get ads served that aren't real valid ads. But yeah, anyway, use the test ones. It definitely will save you some headaches down the line. Next thing we're going to do is basically this function we have here. Let's just go ahead and copy it over, because since we're doing these interstitial ads, we're going to set this same thing up with our interstitial IDs. So we'll just call this, and that string didn't get copied, so we'll call this get interstitial ad IDs. I'm not going to go through how to get your ID. It'll be the same process as the last video for getting your production ID, but we will use these test IDs for the interstitial. So again, the iOS version is right here, which is that, and then this. Okay, actually this interstitial one, this is actually the interstitial key up here. I made a typo there. I was copying from a note over on a different screen. This is the ID, but I'll link below where you can see these IDs. They're all just right here on the Google Docs. But yeah, you'll want the interstitial, and they are different between iOS and Android. But anyway, this looks like it should be good, so we can use this get interstitial ad unit ID to actually build our interstitial test ad, which we're going to do right now. So we're actually going to be using a new package, which we briefly discussed in the last video about that banner ads. I talked briefly about using Firebase AdMob for the banner ads, and that is possible in here, but I was not able to figure out how to get it configured to display the ad just centered here. Instead, it would always be on top of something, so that's up to you. If you don't need this in a list view or looking like this, then definitely just only use this Firebase AdMob package. But Luckily, if you followed along from the banner ad stuff, everything is pretty much configured in terms of your AdMob keys and stuff. So if you haven't done that yet, I'm again not going to go over it here, but go check out the last video and it will go over how to do all of that. If you go to installing, all we're going to do is get this Firebase AdMob dependency and go ahead and put that in our pubspec.yaml and then run pub-get, which should just get that package for us, which is good. The next thing we're going to do is go back to our AdMob services class, which again, this is right now just really has our IDs, pretty much getters for IDs. We're going to create a new function here, which is going to return an actual interstitial ad. So you can decide to do this here, or you could even just write it in your code, but I'm going to show you how to do it here. So first we're going to need to import that new package that we just included, which is the Firebase AdMob. And there's that. Now we can create a function down here, which is going to return it's going to actually return an interstitial ad. So the return type is interstitial ad, and then we're going to call this get. Since this interstitial ad is actually going to happen after we go through the whole new trip form process, which real quick over here in our views, we have this new trip file, and the summary view is where this will actually get called, and it'll get called on this on press button. But if you're following along and want to incorporate it into your app, it can really be done on any button action that you choose. So any button could trigger this ad, this interstitial ad. So anyway, we'll call this get a new trip interstitial because it's going to be triggered by the new trip. And then we'll just return that interstitial ad. And there's just a few parameters we need to give here. The first one being actually that ad unit ID. So add unit ID is going to be this get interstitial add unit ID. Use a comma after that, and then we can add this listener here. There's a few other things you can add here, and if you look through the documentation on the actual pub.dev for this, you can see there's a few things that you can add for this interstitial. Essentially, this is all we're doing right here. You can add target information. I'm not going to do that right now, but basically the target information is just some like device specific or user specific stuff. You could add some keywords in, but anyway, you can look more into that, and if you wanted to add it, it's pretty simple. You could just add this target information line, but we will add this listener just so you could see stuff being printed, and I just did copy that, and we'll just print what it is printing. There are a few different event types, so you could use the different event type to trigger different things in your app, but really we're not going to get too deep into that, and I don't really think it makes that much of a difference. It's maybe used more for tracking stuff, but I think the way we have the app set up and the way we're going to have this interstitial ad set up, it's not really necessary. But anyway, we have this nice new function, which is going to give us our interstitial ad. So we need to actually get it loaded on our summary view. So go back to the summary view, and actually all the way up at the top, we're going to include two packages. One is going to be that AdMob service file that we were just in, which is under our services, and then it's called our AdMob service. And the second one is going to be actually Firebase AdMob. All right, so then right below this trip here, which is inside our stateless widget, which is actually representative of the entire page, which is going to be, is going to be this page here. If we just continue through all this stuff, this is the page we're actually talking about, this summary view. And when any of these buttons are clicked is when the ad will actually pop up. So we're going to need to create an instance of our AdMob service, which is again that file we were just in. So our AdMob service, which you'll see is just a class called AdMob service. So we'll call that AMS is going to be the name of our variable, and we'll just call it like that. So now we have an instance of our AdMob service. That's really all we need there. We can now create a instance of that interstitial ad. So this is going to be a type interstitial ad, and we can just call this the new trip ad, and then that is going to equal this function that we just created, this interstitial ad. We're going to use this function to get actually the interstitial ad we want. So we're going to have to use our AdMob service instance, which we just defined up there, and then call that function on it. And then that we'll now have an instance of that. The next thing we can do is actually load this. So if we take our new interstitial add and then call load on it, that will get it preloaded on when we get to this page so that it will be ready for when the button is clicked. One quick thing we are going to have to do is actually create an instance of Firebase AdMob. So if we go back to the docs, you can see creating the instance of it is pretty simple. You just have to initialize it with your app ID. So we're going to actually do this in the main file of our app. So if you go down to main.dart, and you can see the way that this is written right here is kind of assuming that we only have one function, which is run app my app. We're going to slightly change that. So instead of calling main like this, which is just pointing to one function, I'll leave that there while I write the next one, but we're going to call void here, and then we're going to redefine main, and we're going to delete the one above. In fact, I'll just comment it out. And then we can use the open and close brackets, which is the longer hand for creating this, for creating a function. One thing that is missing here, and I'm going to add it right now, this caused some problems while reloading stuff. This widger flutter bindings.ensure initialized. This is optional, you don't necessarily need it, but I did run into some problems where this ended up solving it. If you get an error about things getting loaded out of order, this could solve the problem. But anyway, that's a bit off topic. You don't necessarily need that for this. Back here, this line that we copied, go ahead and copy that again. And this is, again, going to initialize Firebase AdMob, which you'll see that's underlined in red, and that's because we are going to need to import it. So import Firebase AdMob. And then the app ID we actually have defined in our AdMob service, and that function is called get AdMob app ID. So go ahead and copy that, and then back in main we will need to import that package as well, which is under our services again. So then we will need a new instance of the AdMob service and then call get AdMob app ID on it. So essentially this will just return the app ID depending if it's iOS or Android. And then finally, once all that's done, we can actually call the run app that we were initially calling from main, and then everything should be loading nicely. We can delete this line up here because it's no longer needed. And I would recommend stopping and restarting the app entirely, because sometimes hot reload doesn't work when you do a larger change with the whole configuration. It might work, might not. Either way. Moving on back to the summary view, while that loads up, we need to actually, we've loaded the ad, and now we need to actually show the ad. So we want the ad to show after the on pressed, and we want that to happen after we save to the database, but before we re-navigate. Right here after we save to the database, we can just call that new trip ad, which again is this interstitial ad that we just defined up here. We call that new trip ad, and now we can call show on it, and that will have actually a semicolon at the end. There are a few parameters we can give this, which we might as well just give it. They're basically defaulting it to 0. If you look in the docs again, you'll see these 3 lines here, which are just anchoring it to the bottom and giving it 0 offsets horizontally and vertically. Well, the offset would be the vertical, and then the horizontal is also 0. So if you save that and then rerun the app. All right, the app took a second there to reload, but now it's back up. If I go to add a new trip now, and we can do this to Boston and just continue through the date stuff and put any budget in and continue there. Now when I click this, any of these buttons, our interstitial ad should pop up, and it should be that test ad. So let's see, there it is, looks real good. This is the test ad because we use that test ID again. You're going to want to, before you deploy this, you're going to want to update this to, obviously your real ad IDs, but this is exactly what you would want. Then when you X this out, it should bring us back to our home page, because it should then use this navigator push. So if we X out of this, you'll see we are back on the home page. Great, so that's it for the interstitial ads. Hopefully you found this useful. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and liking the video. All right, that's it. Ciao for now.